President Trump is slamming Senator Mitt Romney and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi over impeachment. He spoke a little while ago at the National Prayer Breakfast. The president held up a newspaper with the headline, "Acquitted," before delivering remarks. And during his speech, he appeared to take a swipe at the Utah Republican for using faith to justify voting to convict him.
My family, our great country, and your president have been put through a terrible ordeal by some very dishonest and corrupt people. They have done everything possible to destroy us, and by so doing, very badly hurt our nation. They know what they are doing is wrong, but they put themselves far ahead of our great country. Weeks ago and again yesterday, courageous Republican politicians and leaders had the wisdom, fortitude, and strength to do what everyone knows was right. I don't like people who use their faith as justification for doing what they know is wrong.
We'll remind you that Senator Romney was the only Republican to vote in favor of convicting the president of abusing his power. Now the president's son is demanding the GOP expel him from the party. Nancy Cordes takes a closer look.
It's over, America.
The White House celebrated Wednesday night, President Trump declaring it our country's victory. After a nearly 5-month-long process with more than 30 hours of public witness testimony and 180 questions from senators, the vote, as expected, fell well short of the 2/3 needed for removal.
That the said Donald John Trump be, and he is hereby, acquitted of the charges in said articles.
It was, in the end, a straight party line vote, with one notable exception.
The president is guilty of an appalling abuse of public trust.
Utah Republican Mitt Romney said the president did commit a high crime or misdemeanor when he used military aid to pressure Ukraine to investigate a political rival and his son.
There's no question in my mind that were their names not Biden, the president would never have done what he did.
He made his decision. As I said, I think it's a mistake.
Senate Republicans were forgiving.
Mitt Romney had us fooled.
The president was less so, tweeting out this video, claiming Romney is a Democrat secret asset. After the vote, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell repeatedly refused to say, as he has for months, whether Mr. Trump did anything wrong.
As far as I'm concerned, it's in the rearview mirror. What I'm here to talk about today is the political impact.
President Clinton apologized after his impeachment acquittal in 1999.
I want to say again to the American people how profoundly sorry I am for what I said and did to trigger these events.
Democrats do not expect the same contrition from Mr. Trump.
I would pray to the good Lord. I didn't see that lesson learned.
All right, for more, let's bring in Weijia Jiang. She is live from the White House. Weijia, as we mentioned, the president is set to address impeachment at noon. But as you know, he was just at the National Prayer Breakfast. And at the opening of those remarks that the president made, Arthur Brooks gave a speech urging people in the room to love your enemies and set aside contempt for those who disagree. And of course, the president began his remarks with, "Arthur, I don't know if I agree with you." And I think it got people talking about this potentially being a preview of what we can expect to hear from the president at noon. What are you hearing from the White House?
Absolutely. This is going to be a victory lap. It's also going to be an airing of grievances because we know the president has been so angry about this for so long, and now he's been acquitted. So we should expect much more of what we just heard, even in that setting, which, as you mentioned, was the National Prayer Breakfast. He started off his speech by attacking both Mitt Romney and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Of course, we heard him saying in a clip earlier that, he does not like it when people use their faith to make decisions, to justify decisions that they know is wrong. He also went on to say he doesn't like when people say, "I pray for you," when that's not the case. Of course, Pelosi has repeatedly said in the past that she prays for President Trump. And so, Vlad, I think coming up at noon during these formal remarks, we should expect him to go all out. And it's unclear if he'll take questions, but certainly I think he's emboldened and he has a lot to say, especially since he really hasn't talked about this, about his acquittal, since it happened.
You know, Weijia, I was thinking to myself, you know, the president was acquitted by the United States Senate, but perhaps his anger and his family's anger with Senator Mitt Romney is because the president could have today said, look, I was acquitted by all the members of my party. And as you know, we were perhaps thinking that there were perhaps even some Democrats that might have voted in that way. Turned out it did not happen. Every Democrat voted to convict. And then you had Mitt Romney, which sort of takes away from perhaps one of the victory laps the president wanted to take, except, Weijia, he has been acquitted.
Right, but I think he'll still be extremely annoyed by that small stain of not being able to say the entire party stood behind him. It's not necessarily surprising, though. I mean, there's no love lost between these two men. Their feud dates back all the way to 2012 when Romney was the Republican presidential candidate. Trump actually supported him, but ultimately started ridiculing him after President Obama won a second term. And then, if you'll remember, when the president jumped into the Republican primary back in 2015, Mitt Romney delivered a very passionate speech and urged Republicans not to vote for Mr. Trump, saying that he was a fraud and a phony. So these two have had a really difficult relationship since then, and so I think you'll hear much more of that from President Trump to sort of try to explain why Romney voted the way he did. He'll likely say it's not because he did anything wrong, but it's because Romney has an axe to grind from years and years ago.
And you know, Weijia, as you know, we reported, Major Garrett reported in the days leading up to this vote that the word from the White House was that if you go against the president, you could find your head on a pike. And you'll recall how often you heard members of the Senate, Republicans, say, no, that's absolutely not true, would never happen, did not happen. And yet, if Mitt Romney is an example, I mean, it's exactly what is happening. You are seeing those supporters of President Trump go after Mitt Romney. You're seeing people on talk radio, people on Fox News going after Mitt Romney. What you're not seeing so much are Republican senators going after Senator Romney because they need him to maintain their majority in the United States Senate. So this idea that the president's son is floating of expelling Mitt Romney from the GOP would only hurt them.
Absolutely. And so it's a really tricky situation, but the president is not one to hold back or really think about the political consequences when he is in this mode, which is angry because he feels betrayed. And despite the message that the White House sent, Romney decided to go against him. And you're right. I think it's very telling that Romney himself said that he knows that there will be consequences, but he had to do what he felt was right. So who knows what sort of political price there could be to pay. But other Republicans, whether they admit it or not, are aware of how much potential power President Trump holds, especially during an election year.
Yeah. Weijia, real quick, in just 10 or 15 seconds, was the White House caught off guard by Senator Romney's decision?
Yeah, they were not expecting it at all because as recently as 1 day ago, Romney was telling Mr. Trump's allies that he was going to vote along with Republicans. And so this was a surprise, and Mr. Trump will weigh in a lot more, again, during those remarks coming up at noon. Yeah, and we will be watching. Weijia Jiang, always a pleasure. Thank you, Weijia. Thanks, Vlad.
And for more, let's bring in Ilya Shapiro. He's the director of the Robert A. Levy Center for Constitutional Studies at the Cato Institute. So, Ilya, President Trump has been acquitted, but this is unlikely to be the end of the matter, at least when it comes to the House of Representatives. We are hearing that House Intel Chief Adam Schiff last night on MSNBC saying that Democrats are discussing a subpoena for former National Security Advisor John Bolton. How would that process work, and what power do they now actually have to compel him to testify? And what would it mean, in fact, for the president, I guess, given that he's already been acquitted in the Senate?
Well, they have the same power they've always had. They're conducting an oversight investigation. And if Bolton or whomever they want to subpoena at this point complies, then they'll have more hearings. If he doesn't, then it'll be in the courts as other subpoenas unrelated to the Ukraine conversation currently are, relating to Don McGahn and certain other things. I doubt the Democrats are going to try to impeach him again, regardless of what comes out of these additional investigatory hearings. This is probably just to keep the waters muddied about what Trump may or may not have done through the election season. And truth be told, if Trump is reelected this fall, as now I think is more likely than not, and likelier now after acquittal than before the process started, while the Democrats keep the House, it could be that they're gearing up to impeach him again, but for the same transaction seems far-fetched. So I don't know what the long-term play is. Certainly in the short term, they want to keep throwing mud at the president and say, even though he's acquitted, this is by far not the end of the story as far as the political season going into the election goes.
Yeah. And Ilya, I know we've talked about this over the past couple of days, but for people who are just tuning in and who are just hearing the news that the president has been acquitted, I want you to explain to our audience, because the president is describing yesterday's vote as a victory. What does an acquittal mean when it comes to the United States Senate, and how does it differ from one in a traditional court of law?
Right. Well, the Senate trial is not a criminal trial. It's not a court of law in the sense that the Senate can't punish the president or a judge, whomever they're trying for impeachment, with anything other than removal from office and barring from future elected office. And so any official who is impeached and removed could then be prosecuted in a criminal court, but that's completely separate than what the Senate is doing. Importantly, the big distinction between senators and jurors is that in a criminal trial, jurors are merely judging the facts of the case. Are you guilty of doing certain things? The judge takes care of legal issues. Is that a crime? These things. Has the prosecutor proven with the jury's fact-finding that those elements satisfy a crime? Here, senators are judging both the facts and the law. And it seems like most of the Republicans, at least, regardless of what they thought about the facts, thought that even if President Trump did whatever he's accused of doing, that doesn't rise to the level of being an impeachable or at least a removable offense.
And again, for viewers who are just coming along and following this, is it the same thing? What does it mean to be exonerated? And could the president claim that he's been exonerated?
Well, there's no such thing under the law as exoneration in this context of impeachment. He has been acquitted. The Senate has not achieved the 2/3 threshold required to convict and remove. And therefore, political spin is that he's exonerated in the sense that the impeachment effort, the removal effort, failed. But it's the purpose of the Senate trial is not to prove a negative. That is, a majority of senators said that he did nothing wrong or something like that. So talk of exoneration or what have you, that's political spin, just like the Democrats are spinning on the other side that, even a lot of Republicans say that it was not a perfect call or what have you. But as far as the legal standards go or the constitutional standards go, what we have here is an acquittal. It's a president who was impeached but not removed. Same thing that happened with Bill Clinton.
Right. So that's sort of my final question, I guess, Ilya, and it's good that you bring it up. You've got some Republican senators like Lamar Alexander, for example, saying the president's actions were inappropriate but not impeachable. You've got Senator Collins saying, she thinks the president's learned his lesson, paraphrasing that. You're hearing a lot of people saying, well, he won't do that again, or he won't engage in that kind of behavior. But if the president were to do so, given that he has been acquitted by the Senate, could he say, look, you didn't find it problematic or impeachable when I did it the last time with Ukraine. So, Russia, if you're listening, do what you do. I mean, could the president, in other words, has his power to engage in this kind of behavior somewhat, has it been expanded because of this acquittal in the Senate?
Well, certainly for political purposes, that will be the argument for this or any other future president, to the extent that anything that he or she might be accused of is similar to this phone call to a foreign leader, pressuring them to conduct an investigation or what have you. It's not a legal standard. It's not something that, in the Constitution's Fifth Amendment has a double jeopardy clause saying you can't be prosecuted for the same crime, at least by the same government, by the federal government or by the state government. And so, truth be told, again, if Trump is reelected and the Democrats hold the House, nothing legal or constitutional is stopping them from impeaching him for exactly the same phone call if they find out more information. Now, I doubt that's going to happen. That's a very tough political road to hoe. But certainly this president, or as I said, any future one, will say a simple phone call to a foreign leader, which looks like some sort of quid pro quo, not in so many words. Well, Trump was acquitted. This is just the same old thing. So it's a precedent of that kind, a political one, not necessarily a legal one.
Ilya Shapiro, always great to have you. Ilya, I got to tell you, I am absolutely fascinated by that Captain America. I'm a huge comic nerd, so I'm fascinated by that Captain America behind your head that I see every day that we talk.
That's my infant son training with, he's planking with Iron Man behind the scenes. That was a few years ago with that Captain America framing, so that was iconic.
That's awesome. Thank you, Ilya, as always. We appreciate it.
Thank you.